Woman mocks black man at party, and her husband loses 390 million contract. There was something about that night that Marcus couldn't name, a kind of quiet pressure, like before a rain that takes its time, but always comes. He paused for a second before entering the hall, straightened his tie, took a deep breath. It wasn't nervousness, it was almost the opposite. It was that strange calm you feel when you know something important is about to happen, and you still don't know if it's going to be good or bad. The night had everything it took to be the greatest of his life. Years of work, sleepless nights, difficult conversations, and rejected proposals. Everything had led to that event. The contract about to be signed was worth $390 million. It wasn't a number that fit easily in your head. It was the kind of figure that changes the fate of a company, of a family, of a story. But sometimes life decides that the straightest path isn't the one you'll take. No one there knew at that moment that before the night was over, a glass of red wine tossed with disdain would change the fate of everyone in that hall. Not Marcus, not the man who was about to lose everything, and certainly not the woman who threw it. The hall was one of those places that seemed to have been built to impress. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden light across the ceiling. The tables had starched white tablecloths, and the murmur of conversations blended with the subtle sound of a piano in the background. It was the kind of environment where everyone tries to seem more important than they really are. Marcus knew that game well. He had learned to play it calmly, without rushing, watching more than speaking. He was 38 years old, tall with broad shoulders inside a blue suit that matched a tie in the same shade, chosen carefully for a reason only he knew. He had the manner of someone who grew up learning that the world doesn't open doors for free, and that every space you occupy has to be conquered twice, once to get in, and again to be respected once you're inside. The company Marcus built started in a room in the back of his grandmother's house, in a small rural town in Kansas where everyone knew each other and where few people believed that a boy from that place could go so far. Most truly didn't believe it. Only Mrs. Beatrice believed, always. Mrs. Beatrice was 72 years old and had a voice that seemed made for speaking truths. She wasn't a woman who wasted words. When she spoke, it was because she had something to say, and when she went quiet, it was because she was thinking deeper than anyone around her. Marcus used to joke that he learned more about business from his grandmother than from any book. She'd been selling homemade treats in front of her house since she was 15, never went to college, but knew how to calculate margins, understand customers, and keep her word with a precision that many executives don't achieve even after a graduate degree. It was she who said, when he was in his early 20s and his first business was starting to get off the ground, "Marcus, you're going to walk into many rooms where people will pretend you shouldn't be there. Go in anyway. Stay quiet. Let your work speak louder than any ignorance." He hadn't fully understood it at the time. That night, he was going to understand. Harrison Vance was the kind of man who filled a room with his presence, not through talent, but through the sheer amount of space he occupied. 51 years old, hair slightly graying at the temples, the type who gets better looking with age and knows it. He ran a construction company that his father had founded 30 years earlier, and that he had transformed, for better and for worse, into a much bigger company than the one he inherited. The problem is that growing too fast sometimes creates cracks that take a while to appear, and Harrison's cracks were about to become an abyss. The contract with Marcus was more than a number. It was the way out. Harrison's company had bet on an expansion too big for the moment, had taken out loans that needed to be repaid, and was operating with much less slack than the partners let on in meetings. If the contract was signed, everything would be resolved. If not, Harrison tried not to think about that part. He had spent the last 3 months building this relationship with Marcus. Lunches, meetings, site visits. He had been careful, attentive, had shown the best the company had to offer, and Marcus had shown himself receptive. Not easy. It was never easy, but genuinely interested. In their last conversation a week before that party, Marcus had said, "Harrison, I think we've got everything we need to close this." It was almost certain. Almost. Clarissa entered the room a step behind her husband, as always, but with the bearing of someone who believes she should have walked in first. 36 years old, blonde, a green dress that cost more than most people make in a month, the right earrings, the right smile, the right conversation for each group. She knew how to work a room. She knew how to please whoever needed to be pleased. It was a quality Harrison admired, and that at the same time tired him out, because Clarissa alone decided who deserved to be pleased and who didn't. And she had a way of judging that was almost instinctive, too quick, based on things she would never have admitted out loud. Marcus was near the drinks table when she first saw him. He was talking to Evelyn, his trusted business partner, a 45-year-old woman who had the gift of reading social settings as if they were spreadsheets. It was Evelyn who first noticed Clarissa's gaze sweep Marcus from head to toe, linger a second longer than it should have, and then turn to a friend beside her with a smile at the corner of her mouth. "She said something," Evelyn murmured to Marcus quietly. He didn't answer. He picked up his glass of water and looked away. Clarissa had drunk more than usual that night. She wasn't completely drunk, but she was in that in-between state where the filters get thinner and the jokes you'd normally keep to yourself start to slip out. She was laughing at something with a friend when her eyes found Marcus again, and this time he was closer, almost beside her in the line near the drinks. He wasn't anyone she knew, just some guest, she must have thought, someone who shouldn't be so at ease in a place like that. What happened next lasted less than 30 seconds, but those 30 seconds are going to echo for much longer. Clarissa said something, then she laughed, an open laugh, head thrown back, with no concern for who was listening. And as she laughed, with the disregard of someone who sees nothing around her because she doesn't care to see, she tipped her glass of red wine in Marcus's direction. It might have been accidental. It might have been that kind of intention you don't even admit to yourself. The wine slid down his face over the blue suit, over the tie, ran down his chest. The room didn't stop. But part of the room saw, and those who saw it fell silent. Marcus didn't shout, didn't step back. He stayed exactly where he was, eyes closed for a second, jaw slightly clenched, breathing. Then he opened his eyes, looked at her, and said nothing. He picked up a napkin from the table calmly, wiped his face, wiped the lapel of his suit, folded the napkin carefully, and set it on the edge of the table. Clarissa was still laughing, not out of nervousness. She was genuinely laughing. There are things you witness that give you second-hand embarrassment. I wasn't in that room, but when I found out about this part, I felt a tightness in my chest that took a while to go away. Arthur, Harrison's minority partner, was about 25 feet away and saw everything. He was a 63-year-old man with completely white hair, with that way of someone who had spent his life learning to read situations before making decisions. He wasn't the type to react quickly, but this time he walked straight up to Harrison without hesitating. "Harrison," he said quietly, approaching from the side, "there's something you need to know." Harrison was in another conversation and raised a finger, the gesture of someone asking for a second. "No," Arthur said again firmly. "Now." Harrison turned. Arthur told him what he had seen. As he spoke, Harrison went pale in a way that couldn't be disguised. "Who is the man?" he asked. "Marcus Sterling," Arthur answered. "Your $390 million contract." The silence that followed was the kind that weighs. Harrison couldn't speak for about 3-4 seconds. Then he turned his face toward the other side of the ballroom, where Clarissa was still with her group, the empty glass in her hand, completely oblivious to what she had set in motion. He walked over to her. He didn't run, but he walked fast. "Clarissa." His voice was low, controlled, but there was something underneath it that she recognized. She looked at him. "What is it?" "The man in the blue suit. What did you do to him?" She shrugged. "I accidentally hit him with my glass." "Why are you like this?" Harrison ran his hand over his face. "Do you know who that man is?" "No. Some guest." "He's not just some guest, Clarissa." His voice trembled a little. "He's Marcus Sterling, the owner of MS Holdings, the contract I've been trying to close for 3 months, The contract that's going to save the company. Her smile vanished. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Marcus had left the area where the incident happened and went to the side veranda of the ballroom. Evelyn was beside him, quiet. She knew he needed a moment before anything else. It was one of the reasons he trusted her so much. She never filled the silence with unnecessary words. I need to leave, he said finally. I know, she replied, but wait a little. Let things settle. Marcus looked up at the glass roof of the veranda. Outside, the sky was clear, full of stars. He thought of his grandmother, thought about what she would say. She'd probably say that what hurt the most wasn't the wine itself, but the casualness with which it had been thrown, as if he were nothing there, as if there were no possible consequence for that gesture. The question was, what was he going to do about it? At that moment he still didn't know, but as he stood there looking at the sky, he began to feel that clarity that sometimes comes after a blow, a cold, clean feeling of someone who knows exactly what he wants and what he no longer wants. Harrison stepped onto the veranda 10 minutes later, alone, without his wife, without anyone. Marcus heard the footsteps and didn't turn right away. Marcus. Harrison's voice had a quality he had never heard before. It wasn't the voice of the confident businessman. It was the voice of a man who knew he had arrived too late. Marcus turned, stood looking at him for a moment. I know that anything I say now is going to sound insufficient, Harrison began. I saw what happened. I'm deeply sorry. I have no words for what Clarissa did, and I take responsibility because she is my wife and she was here as my guest. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He looked at him with the expression of someone assessing not only what he hears, but everything beneath what is said. Harrison, he said at last slowly, I've been through a lot in life. I grew up in a place where I learned early that there are people who won't see me the way I want to be seen, no matter what I build or what I do. I learned to deal with it, but I never learned to pretend I don't feel. Harrison stayed quiet. What your wife did wasn't an accident, Marcus continued. It may have been the gesture, but the intention was in everything before it, in the way she looked, in what she said beforehand, in the laughter. I was there. I saw it. I know, Harrison said, and his voice faltered at the end. Then you understand that the problem isn't the suit, Marcus said. The problem is what became visible about who you are. There was a long pause between his sentences. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper than anger. It was the clarity of someone who has seen this movie before and knows exactly how far it goes. Harrison took a deep breath. I understand if you don't want anything else to do with us. I completely understand. I only came here because I needed to look into your eyes and say, I'm sorry. Truly. Regardless of any contract. Marcus kept looking at him. For a moment his closed-off expression revealed nothing. Then something crossed his face. Not exactly forgiveness, but a recognition. The difference between a man apologizing to save a business and a man apologizing because he knows he was wrong, even if the mistake wasn't directly his. I need to think, Marcus said. Of course. And I need one thing before any conversation about business. Harrison waited. I need Clarissa to come to me personally, without you by her side, without the company as a backdrop. Her, me, and what she's going to say. Harrison nodded. I'll talk to her. What he didn't know yet was how difficult that conversation was going to be. Clarissa was sitting in a more secluded corner of the hall when Harrison found her. The smile had completely left her face. She had already understood the gravity of the situation, but there was something in her that still resisted calling what she had done by its right name. You need to go talk to him, Harrison said, sitting down beside her. I already said it was an accident. Clarissa. His voice was tired, not with anger, tired. You know it wasn't just the glass. She stayed quiet. I needed you to look at me and tell me you understand what's at stake, not just for the company, for me, for us. She bit her lip. So it's about the money? No. Harrison leaned forward. It's about who you were that night, And about how much it's going to cost beyond the money. There was a long pause. In the distance, the piano kept playing, oblivious to everything. I don't know if I can, she finally said quietly. Can do what? Go there and apologize for real. The way he's going to want. Harrison looked at her for a long moment, and it was in that look, not judgment, but a kind of quiet sadness, that Clarissa saw something that unsettled her more than any argument could. Then, he said, getting up slowly, I think we already know what's going to happen. He left, leaving her sitting there. The conversation that followed between Clarissa and Marcus on the porch wasn't witnessed by anyone. Only the two of them knew what was said. But Evelyn, who was discreetly waiting near the entrance, saw Marcus's expression when he came back, saw that it wasn't relieved, nor hardened. It was the face of someone who had heard something they needed to hear, but was still processing whether it was enough. Here I need to stop for a second, because there's something about this kind of situation that I keep thinking about. We live in a world where the hardest apologies are exactly the ones that most need to be given, not the easy ones, not the convenient ones, the ones that cost something to those who give them. And the question that remains is, when someone finally gives that apology, can we truly receive it? Or do we hold on to the resentment anyway? Marcus spent the night awake in the hotel room where he was staying. He called Mrs. Beatrice around 11 at night, knowing she would still be awake. She always stayed up late, with the television on low and a rosary in her hands. "Grandma," he said when she answered. "Marcus." She knew from his voice. She always knew. What happened? He told her everything, and she listened to it all, from start to finish, without interrupting. When he finished, there was a few seconds' silence. "And now?" she asked. "I don't know, Grandma." "You do know," she said, with that firmness of hers that wasn't harshness, it was clarity. "You're just waiting for me to confirm what you've already decided." He closed his eyes. "Do you think I'm being stubborn?" "I think you're being honest," she replied. "Stubborn would be different. Honest is when you know what you're worth, and you don't accept less than that. Those are two different things, my son." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do with the contract?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. The answer was on the tip of his tongue, but he needed time to let it out. The next morning, Marcus sent a message to Harrison. Short, direct. It said they needed to talk, and not in the salon, not over the phone, in person at a neutral place, just the two of them. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot since we're just starting out. Now continuing. The cafe he chose was quiet, the kind of neighborhood place where the tables have checkered tablecloths, and the background noise is just the traffic outside and the low murmur of people's voices. Marcus arrived first, ordered a simple coffee, waited. Harrison arrived 8 minutes late, the first time in all those months that he'd been late to any meeting. Marcus noticed, didn't say anything. They sat down. Harrison tried to start, and Marcus cut him off gently. "Let me speak first." Harrison nodded. "I spent the night thinking," Marcus began, "not about the contract, about what this whole situation revealed, about the kind of partnership I'd be building, about who you are and who your wife is. Because in a long-term partnership, you're not just doing business with a company. You're doing business with people, and people bring who they are with them." Harrison listened with his eyes fixed, motionless. "Clarissa came to talk to me. She said words that needed to be said. I don't know if they came out the right way, but I saw that it cost her something to say them. And that counts." A pause. "But counting isn't enough for a $390 million contract." Harrison closed his eyes for a second. "I can't sign this contract now," Marcus said. "Not because I want to punish you, but because I'd be entering a partnership carrying something that hasn't been digested, and that poisons any business, over time." Harrison nodded slowly. The silence between them was heavy, but there was no hostility. "I understand," Harrison said finally. His voice was low, restrained. "I didn't expect any other kind of answer, honestly. but I needed to sit here and hear it from you. There's something I want to ask you, Marcus continued. And you don't have to answer now, not even to me. But think about it. He leaned forward a little. If this whole thing hadn't happened, if the contract was secure, what would you have done? Would you have had this same conversation with Clarissa? Harrison stared at him for a long moment. I don't know, he replied, with an honesty that clearly cost him. Marcus nodded. That's what I thought too. They sat for a while, in silence, their coffee growing cold. It was one of those silences that says more than any conversation ever could. The contract wasn't signed that week, nor the next. Harrison's company entered a difficult period. It didn't collapse. Arthur, with his 63 years of experience, worked nights to reorganize what could be reorganized, renegotiate what could be renegotiated. It was a long, exhausting period that left its marks on everyone close to it. Clarissa, in the months that followed, went through something she herself couldn't name at first. It wasn't guilt. She took a while to get to the real guilt. It was more like a discomfort that wouldn't go away, like a pebble in your shoe that you ignore until you start limping. She began to notice some things about herself, about the looks she cast, about the judgments she made too quickly, about the laughs she gave at things that shouldn't have been funny. It was a slow process, painful, the way growth usually is. Harrison and she went through difficult conversations. There were nights when the two of them lay in silence in the same bed, unable to sleep. There were mornings when she wondered if the marriage would survive all of it. But it was precisely on those mornings that she understood that the problem had never been the marriage. The problem was in something she had been carrying inside her for much longer. She began to do what is one of the most courageous acts a person can do, to truly look inward and not look away when the image is uncomfortable. 6 months after the night of the party, Marcus received a message from Harrison. It wasn't about the contract, it was about Clarissa. It said she was doing volunteer work at an organization that supports young people from the community, a project she had sought out on her own without anyone asking, and that she was taking it seriously, showing up every week, listening, learning. Marcus read the message 3 times, then he put his phone away. That afternoon he called Mrs. Beatrice again. "Grandma, do you remember when you told me that there are people who won't see me no matter what I do?" "I remember," she said. "And when that same person starts trying to see, what do we do with that?" Mrs. Beatrice was quiet for a moment. Then she answered with that voice of someone who has lived long enough to know that quick answers are usually wrong. "We observe," she said, "because words are easy. Action over time is what matters. Don't give all your credit at once, and don't close the door all at once either. Observe, and keep feeling it out." Marcus carried that phrase with him for weeks. 8 months after that night, he and Harrison met again. This time, the meeting was requested by Marcus. At a simple lunch, without ceremony, without ties, Marcus arrived with a different proposal from the original one. Smaller, more cautious, with clauses that protected both sides in ways the previous version hadn't. It wasn't the 390 million. It was less, considerably less. But it was a beginning that had been built on something more solid than business enthusiasm. "Why are you coming back?" Harrison asked, without beating around the bush. Marcus thought about the answer carefully. "Because I think what happened with you and Clarissa was real, and I learned to respect process, not arrival. Process." Harrison kept looking at him. There was something in the man's eyes that was different from 8 months before, a certain lightness that didn't exist before. Or maybe it wasn't lightness, maybe it was settled weight, which is different. "I'm accepting," Harrison said. The proposal was signed on a Thursday afternoon at a simple notary's office with no party, no crystal chandelier, no red wine. Just 2 men and an agreement that had cost much more than money to get there. Clarissa found out the same day when Harrison came home and told her. She stood still in the middle of the kitchen with an expression he had never seen on her before. It wasn't relief. It was something more like the weight of understanding that the second chance wasn't given because it was asked for. It was given because it was deserved slowly, over months of different choices. She went to the bedroom, sat on the bed, and cried for a time she herself couldn't measure. It wasn't crying from happiness. It was the crying of someone who can finally truly feel the size of a mistake, and at the same time, the size of something that, against all odds, can still be fixed. Marcus, that same night, called Mrs. Beatrice one more time. "Done," he said when she answered. She laughed, a short, warm laugh, one of those that carries more than just joy. "I knew it," she said. "How come you always know everything, Grandma?" "Because I've known you since before you knew your own name," she replied, "and because a man who was raised with love knows deep down that the world is wider than his wounds." Marcus stayed quiet for a while, phone to his ear, listening to her calm breathing on the other end. "Thank you," he said at last. "You're welcome, my boy." Life went on, as it always does. Months later, in a conversation with Evelyn, Marcus said something that stayed with her for a long time. He said that what that night at the party had done in the end wasn't destroy anything. It was reveal. It revealed Clarissa to herself. It revealed Harrison to Marcus in a way no negotiation ever could have. And it revealed to Marcus that what Mrs. Beatrice had planted in him over the years, that ability to not let hurt turn into shutting down, was the most valuable thing anyone could have ever given him, more than any contract. The end of the story. And so that's it. That's the story of a night that could have ended with everything destroyed, and that somehow ended with something more honest being built instead. It wasn't fast, it wasn't easy, and it wasn't clean. It rarely is. But it was real. Now tell me, do you think Marcus was right to give that second chance? And where are you watching this from today? Leave it in the comments, I read every single one. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel, because there are plenty more stories like this one coming your way. Thank you so much for keeping me company this far.